Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. I am once again back talking about the latest edition of Warcry, and today I am nattering about the Chaos Legionaires. These are one of the latest additions to the bespoke Warcry roster, and to be perfectly honest, they are definitely one of the strangest, although we'll get into all of that as the video potters along. Before we dive into this video, please consider dropping a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. All of these things help the channel grow and help me know what you want to see. If you want to see something new or different, leave a comment, let me know exactly what you want to see, and I will make that my mission to make that, I guess, a reality. So if you want to see the Scions of Flame next, leave a comment. I'll make sure I do Scions of Flame in an upcoming video. But all that out of the way, let's get back to the video. As per usual, we are going to start with what the Chaos Legionaires actually are and their pros and cons. The Chaos Legionaires are servants of the vile demon prince, the first prince of demons, Be'lakor, the Dark Master. These guys are wandering various places, doing all kinds of nefarious things in the name of the one true prince. And for their pros and cons, they are tough, they have very high damage, they are reasonably priced, and their sculpts of the models themselves are gorgeous. But on the flip side, their playstyle is rather unusual, but not in a way you would immediately notice by looking at their cards and stats. They have fairly average speed, they are incredibly dice dependent, so ability dice dependent. RNG is quite literally a curse for this faction, and they have very limited range, as in they don't have any. Most of their weapons are range 1, and outside of that, their actual range potential is next to non-existent. It's there, it's just fairly hard to find and use effectively. And with all of that out of the way, it's time to look at the reactions and the abilities of the Chaos Legionnaires. This is what makes the Chaos Legionnaires the Chaos Legionnaires. This is the meat and potatoes. This is what makes them unique. And we're going to start off with their unique reaction, and that is called Call to Arms. In short, you can use this reaction when an enemy fighter moves within 3 inches of one of your fighters. This fighter can then react by selecting another allied fighter within 3 inches and visible. That selected fighter can then make an immediate bonus move action. However, this action must take them within 1 inch of the enemy fighter that triggered this reaction. So how is Call to Arms? Call to Arms requires a bit of setup to pull off, and even then, it's not impossible for enemies to position themselves to work around this to make it so that you can't move legally into range, therefore your reaction doesn't work. This is especially true of enemies that have longer range weapons, so say a 2-inch spear, or even a 3-inch flail. There's a lot of weapons that have this sort of profile, and these are more difficult to make this legal move. However, this can still work if you keep your models very close together, and when it works very, very well. Bonus moves are always a good thing, and getting your stronger models into combat without having to burn AP is undeniably strong. As a reaction, this is excellent. If you want to use this reaction, you will want to ensure your big units like your Decuriarch or your Hornhelms or your Mutandor are working in tandem with weaker units, or in the case of these guys, it's just the Horn Shields. Because of this, you want to keep your battle groups very mixed. You want to have at least one horn shield in your dagger, in your hammer, and in your shield if you want to use this reaction often. Essentially, you're going to use these horn shields as sacrificial AP reaction caddies. Basically, they're just there to draw in the enemy and then get your guys in for free. That's their whole purpose. With their reaction out of the way, let's move on to their abilities. And starting with their doubles, we have Shield Ram. So, until the end of the activation, the next time a fighter with the relevant Bulwark rune marks ends a movement within 1 inch of an enemy fighter, simply roll a dice. On a 4 to a 5, you deal 1 point of damage, and on a 6, you deal damage equal to the value of the dice you used to trigger the double. This ability is... okay, so I'm going to use quite a strong word here. Okay, this ability is awful. This can be used by 2 types of models in your list, and one of them is your Decuriarch, and the other is Horn Shields, which we've already discussed are based on the reaction, probably going to be used more for AP caddying. This doesn't push them into being good combatants, and this is the only relevant ability Horn Shields can actually use. The damage output here is pitiful, and it only triggers 50% of the time, and for it to do anything of note, you need to have a high double and still roll a 6. This ability is chip damage at best, and you would maybe use this for like a Hail Mary play. If you just had to deal that last pip of damage, then this would be it. You would maybe try and do this, but it's too unreliable. It's not impactful enough for the cost. Doubles are the cheapest form of ability, but there are better doubles here. Much better doubles simply existing within the Universal section, simply existing within the Chaos Legion itself. This is not a good ability. I struggle to find a reliable use for this, and yeah, sure, you can say it's a back pocket trump card kind of thing, but it doesn't really do much even in that kind of way. It's there. It exists, and that's all I can really say about it. Our next double, this one can only be used by your Decuriarch. You pick an enemy within 12 inches. Roll a dice equal to the value of this ability. For every 3+, you deal 1 point of damage. Once all damage has been allocated, the Decuriarch himself then takes D3 damage. This sounds awful until you realise this is the only ranged attack in the entire faction. It's 12 inches, so it's got a hefty range, and it's situationally very good. A low double isn't worth it. You really need to burn a 5 or a 6 to get the most value out of this. You can then use that damage to take down wounded enemies, or even damage enemies so you can finish them off in combat, or snipe characters, or chip away. There's a lot of things you'd use as kind of damage for, especially when it's a 3+ to do a point of damage for up to 6 dice. It's fairly reliable. You've just got to bear in mind that the kicker is the self-inflicted damage at the end. You can absolutely deal more damage to yourself than to the enemy you're targeting, so don't use this ability willy-nilly. It's a scalpel meant to do very specific things. It's not a ranged attack to be thrown around lightly. It's not a use every turn like a bludgeon to try and get extra damage out. It's not that. You will be punished heavily for using it in that way. Be more reserved, be more cautious, and bring it out for those key game-changing moments where you can really turn the tide of an engagement or turn the tide of a battle round. And our last double is Brutal Swing. This is an ability I want to love and I use fairly frequently, but it so very rarely pays off. what you do is you add half the value of this ability, so between 1 and 3, to the crit damage of the next attack made by your Hornhelm units. These are the guys with the big two-handed weapons. This is incredibly powerful if it works, but it is so underwhelming if it whiffs. Hornhelms only have 3 attacks, and fishing for those 6s is not easy. It's not really in your favour when you throw so few dice. Sure, you can crit for 9 damage if you're using the right Hornhelm, but it's too risky. It's a double, a high double, and it might not do anything. And this really sums up the doubles in a nutshell. Every single double has to be a high double to do anything meaningful. And even then, the damage is never guaranteed. It's not just you get into combat and you have a little burst of damage with an easy roll. It's always a difficult roll, and if it's not, there's a huge trade-off, like self-inflicted damage. Both of these, the Shield Ram and the Brutal Swing, require 6s for it to do anything. And in case of Brutal Swing, if you don't get a 6, you do nothing. At least with the Shield Ram, you're doing a point of damage if you roll a 4. Now, all of that being said, Brutal Swing is more effective when you combo it with other abilities, but be prepared for very expensive combos to maybe get this to work reliably. And that's still just a maybe. So now we move on to our triples, and we have Headlong Charge. This can only be used by your Mutando, and it allows him to make a bonus attack action with his spear, but only after he has used 2 move actions in one activation, and only if there is an enemy within 2 inches, so within range of that spear. This ability is actually fine. This ability is the most reliable ability we have seen so far, which makes it fine by default. It is rather expensive since it does require a triple, but it can get your fastest unit up the board and dealing damage with a solid damage profile. It has its place, but it's somewhat clunky. Like, will you use this? Yeah, probably, but is it going to be a priority triple? Not really. Not really. There are triples in this kit that are better, and like so many triples in this faction, it's more of a situational trump card, and like all of them, it's quite clunky. And our final triple of the bunch is the True Master's Favour. This is another ability for the Decuriarch, but this can only be used by the Decuriarch, and it's one that can really make the likes of Brutal Swing worthwhile. So, how this works is your Decuriarch needs to kill something in his activation, and then until the end of the battle round, all fighters within 9 inches of the Decuriarch gain +1 to their attack characteristic. This is pretty substantial. Your damage per AP across the board gets a significant spike. Brutal Swing becomes much more reliable. Your chaff units become far more dangerous. Your Hornhelms, without any other buffs, become monstrous. The big downside, because there has to be a downside, is Chaos Legionaires, is that your Decuriarch has to get a kill. Here's the thing. The Decuriarch, as we will discuss in a moment, is not that great in combat. His stats are rather average on the offense, so to get this to proc, you're going to want to throw him against chaff, and even then, it's not a surefire bet you'll actually land that kill. Against certain factions, so anything that has regular toughness 5 or above units, say Stormcast, you will really struggle to get this off without even further support. But at that point, you're eating away at the value that this ability can actually bring to the table, because you'll be using models that you want to buff, that could use the buff without the buff. Is it powerful? Yes. Is it reliable? No. Again, no. So few of these abilities are actually reliable. Out of all of them so far, only Headlong Charge is reliable, and Headlong Charge isn't an ability you want to use all the time. So yeah, it's good, it's powerful, it's fantastic when it works, but will it work all the time? Will it work against every faction? No, not at all. It just won't. And then this leads us to our final ability, and this is our big Mama Jamba. This is the Wrath of the First Prince. This is the best ability the faction has access to, and it bloody well should be, considering it's a quad. But it also has quite a few trade-offs. So how it works is, any model with the Chaos Legionaires rune mark can use this, and it allows them to make a bonus attack action. During this attack action, any hits equal to half the value of this ability automatically become critical hits, not regular hits. This is strong on just about everything, but it's particularly good on your strongest units. We're talking about the Mutando, the Decuriarch, the Hornhelms, okay? These are all great targets, but do be aware that this is a quad, so it can't be comboed with true Master's Favour to buff your attack stat. So the trade-off here is, the biggest one, is that you can't buff your critical hits chance and also buff the number of attacks you get, and that is painful. It would be amazing to get them both off, but you don't have the dice. There's not enough dice to do any of that. You can only do one or the other. And even then, you still want to use this quad only if it's like a middling to high quad. So 3, 4, 5 or 6 in value to get the most use out of it. Now, considering your Hornhelms can crit for 6 damage per swing, you can get a lot of damage through with this. A staggering amount of damage through with this. A low quad is better used for burning a universal ability, but other than that, this is very solid, even though it doesn't actually combo with anything. And in case you're wondering, no, you can't use this with Brutal Swing to get those spicy damage 9 crits, because this ability is used by the model who wants to use the ability. It's not granted by a third-party source, and models can only use one ability per activation, so you can't buff your critical damage and use this quad at the same time. You can't buff your attack characteristics and use this quad at the same time. It really is like the highlight of a turn, and nothing else goes with it. And again, you could just whiff the dice. Without those extra attack dice from, say, True Master's Favour, most of your guys only get 3 attacks. There is a not insignificant chance you just won't do damage, you'll just miss. And again, this leaves us with the unfortunate realization that none of these abilities are surefire. This is all gambling. And sure, it fits with the idea of chaos, and Be'lakor being this deceptive creature. He's deceiving even his own allies into thinking he's supporting them personally, but he's not. And thematically, that's great. Mechanically, that's not good. None of these abilities are reliable, and as powerful as some of them are, you're going to find that you just don't have the toolkit available to deal with the targets you want to deal with. So, are they good? Yeah, they're okay. But again, beating the same drum here, they're just not reliable enough. But a faction is not just made by their reactions and their actions, they're made by their models. And that's what we're going to cover next. But before we do that, I am going to quickly say we are not covering the Centaurian Marshal here. That guy gets his own video. He gets his own little piece. So we'll cover him later on, because he's not technically part of the faction, because he can be in any Chaos faction. So we're going to put him to one side, swing back to him later on, and just cover what you get in the Chaos Legionaires box here. And firstly, we're going to start with the Decuriarch. This guy is a solid leader. He has higher than usual, like higher than average defenses. His offense is painfully average for a bespoke warband leader, and this is especially noticeable when you consider his abilities, which we have mentioned already. His HP is quite high, coming in at 22, which is higher than normal, which allows him to use Dark Pact more often, which is a nice little addition. So that's nice. Coming in with Toughness 5 as well. The guy's solid. He's 170 points. His stat line is solid. This guy is just a tanky block of meat who has, 4 attacks, strength 4, 2-5 damage. He'll do the job. He really will. He's just there. His abilities are great if they work, but the model itself is solid. That's all I can really say about it. He's a solid centerpiece figure to lead your warband, and that's really it. Next up is the only other unique model in this box, and that's the Mutando. And this guy is very odd. He's very odd. The Chaos Legionaires like to stick together and use their reaction to make most of their high value AP. However, the Mutando doesn't necessarily work with that idea, and he is almost pushed into not following that general creed. Although he absolutely can fall into that, he doesn't have to. The biggest strength of the Mutando is actually his movement. He's movement 5, which makes him the fastest model in this warband, and his attack stats are surprisingly good. This is a powerful piece. He has a range 2 spear, 3 attacks, strength 5, 2-5 damage. This is great. His defensive stats are great. Toughness 4, 18 wounds. He has headlong charge for an ability. The Mutando is really, really solid at working as an independent agent on the board. He can run forward, he can take down archers, he can tie up chaff, he can kill chaff, he can tie up tougher things and still survive. He has the bulk to survive. He can take on characters because his attack stats are comparable to characters. He has a lot of play because of headlong charge, and if you wanted to play him more defensively, he can still use or make use of the call to arms reaction, because he has such a long movement range that the bonus move he gets from call to arms is almost guaranteed to get him into range for a legal reaction. There is a lot of play with the Mutando. He is one of the better models, in my opinion, in this kit. He just requires a little bit more thought when it comes to where you deploy him and how you use him. He's very flexible, which is unique for the Chaos Legionaires. He brings that flexibility nothing else does. And now we are up to the more generic units. We've went over the fancy named things, and we are now over onto the Hornhelms. Hornhelms are the elite shock infantry of this warband. You get 3 in the box, and they come in 2 variants. You have the Hornhelm with axe and the Hornhelm with mace. They are very similar in terms of damage output. So the axe is 3 attacks, strength 5, 2, 6 damage, and the mace is 3 attacks, strength 4, 3, 5 damage. So the axe does more damage on the crits, and it has a higher strength characteristic, so it's good at hitting harder targets. But the mace is much better at killing weaker things. That strength 4 is a bit iffy, but that minimum damage 3 is very, very nice. And both can make use of Brutal Swing, and both absolutely love True Master's Favour when it can get when you can pull it off. So these are both very powerful. And since you get 3 in the set, I would definitely recommend building 2 with axes and 1 with mace. Very few factions have a warband that are consisting entirely of high toughness models, and you want at least 1 mace in there so you have a bit of flexibility when it comes to engaging different targets. If you've got all axes, those axes might struggle to make a dent on a bunch of chaff. Or if you've got all maces, you'll struggle to take out things that have got a lot of defense. Having a mix of the two that leans on axes more gives you a nice balance across the faction. And this is how we would definitely recommend you build them. Although if you wanted to, triple down on one of them, then the axe is probably the best to triple down on if you want to go down that route. And the final unit you have access to is the Horn Shields. The Horn Shields are chaff. Basically, the Horn Shields are chaff. These chaps are very good for their points. We're talking about 95 to 100 points for a toughness 5, movement 4, 12 wound model. This is a very solid stat line that can really bog enemies down. They come in 3 variants, and that is a sword, an axe, and a mace variant. The mace has lower strength, but a higher minimum damage when compared to the axe. And the sword is sort of this like third middle option that does the lowest damage and has the most attacks. Of the bunch, I think the sword is the biggest loser here. So we would recommend running, again, 2 axes and 1 mace. Or if you wanted to triple down, just run them all with axes. Despite all of the strengths inherent to the Hornhelm stat line, they are in a bit of a strange position, and we found the more we played with them, the less we wanted to actually use them for their stats. They became the obligatory reaction bait for better units. These are the guys that we used Call to Arms on, and we used Call to Arms every single time we could, because Call to Arms lets us get our stronger things into combat, and as good as Horn Shields are, they do not compare well in damage stats to anything else in this list. So these are the guys you're going to bring to basically throw away. That's their goal, is to throw away and use the AP for something else, for somebody else. It gives them a clear place in the warband, but it does leave us feeling that the Horn Shields are really underwhelming. I like them for what they do, but they feel like a unit that I desperately want to cut out of the list to bring something a bit more impactful. So they have a place. Will that place be secure enough to keep them once you expand beyond this box? I'm not sure. I think these are the first guys you'll cut, and you'll probably cut all 3. That's just my sneaking suspicion here. And with all the models out of the way, we have prepared for you a example list, and I'm sure you've got an idea of what it's going to be based on what we've said so far. So of course you need to bring the Decuriarch. This guy is tanky, he does okay damage, and he has access to the most abilities. He is your leader, and he needs to stay alive, and he's good at doing that. Okay, he's solid, not much more than that. Then we have the Mutandor, and I love the Mutandor, so of course we're going to take him here. He's only 145 points. He does work. He's flexible. He's versatile. He's got range. This guy has everything that this faction lacks. He is very good, and I think he should definitely be a piece in your list that you need to protect at all costs. And now we have the less interesting aspect of the list, with the 2 Hornhelm with axes and 1 Hornhelm with mace. These guys really are the backbone, the front line, the death dealers of this list. They have the most damage, the best defensive stats. They are very, very good. And then bringing up the rear of the list, we have 2 Horn Shields with axes and 1 Horn Shield with mace. These guys are your AP caddies. They can do okay damage and they are fairly hard to shift because of the high defensive stats, but they won't really do much against a dedicated defense or a dedicated attack unit. All in all, we think this is the best way you could build your Chaos Legionaires. It gives you a lot of variety in your weapons. You haven't tripled down in anything, so you've got a lot of variety on the battlefield in terms of what you can take on effectively. And yeah, there's only so much you can do with this Warband box, and this is probably the best way you could build that list, is this way. Of course, you can do whatever you want, but we would recommend doing it like this. So in conclusion, the Chaos Legionaires are very odd. They're unusual, and you know what? I'm just going to come out and say it. I do not like them. They look great at first glance. They have great models. Their abilities seem powerful at first inspection, but in execution, they feel all over the place. For all of their strengths, mainly the strengths of their base model cards, their ability support is so unbelievably lackluster. And this isn't for a lack of power, because of a lack of consistency. Some games you will roll up and you will deal a bonkers amount of damage and everything will die so brutally and so effectively that you feel kind of bad. My first game with these, I rolled up against Rockmire Creed, and the guy was absolutely devastated. Like, everything died with such brutal efficiency because everything worked. And then on the rematch, man, I was smacking my head against the table because the dice simply weren't on my side that time, and I was forced to rely on the model's base stats, which are great, but when you don't have ability support, it doesn't feel like you're really playing Warcry as much. It feels like you're playing something so generic. And that's the thing. Like, Chaos Legionnaires feel unreliable and they feel generic at times, and I don't want to constantly fall back on universal abilities. I want my faction to feel like a unique faction, like a bespoke piece of the greater Warcry tapestry. This isn't always achieved with the Chaos Legionnaires, and it leaves me feeling really cold towards them. And honestly, this has only become more pronounced with the inclusion of the Hunters of Huanxi and the Jade Obelisk, both of which feel rich with character and variety, and their abilities seem useful but powerful. None of which the Chaos Legion shares. It's a real shame because the Chaos Legion have beautiful sculpts. I love the models for these guys. They just don't perform as well as I want them to perform on the tabletop, and it pains me to say that the Chaos Legionnaires are probably the worst warband to start with. If you want to start Warcry, I would avoid the Chaos Legionnaires. They are one of the few factions that have been built for 2nd edition and that are available outside of a start collecting box, and they're just not good. I don't think they're very good. Can you use them? Can you get results? Yes. But I suspect many people will play them a few times and then just not play them again and move on to something more interesting and more reliable. These guys just feel so bland and so lifeless on the tabletop, and not even the Mutando can stop you from feeling that way, because I love the Mutando. This guy's sculpt is great. He's a beast man carrying a giant fuck-off spear. He's awesome. But his faction surrounding him sucks. He's the only interesting model there. And yeah, man. Writing the script, I thought I was going to be less negative than I am. I went in wanting to be quite upbeat and positive about them. But the more I wrote, the less I liked. And the more I've played, the less I've liked. So yeah, I'm not going to lie to you here, dudes. The Chaos Legionnaires, I'll just skip them. I wouldn't bother. They're okay. At best, there's better things out there. You know, the Rockmire Creed and Horns of a Shut both have boxes now. I would go with either of those. They have more variety than these guys do by a country mile. And that is it for the video. Thank you if you've stuck around this long. It means an awful lot. I am once again here asking for your support, so please drop a like, leave a comment with what you want to see next, what you think of Chaos Legionaires. Do you agree with what I've said? Have I missed something vital that makes the Chaos Legionaires better than I'm suggesting? Let me know. It would mean a lot. I want to improve at the game and at making content. So if you've found a mistake, boom, comment, let me know, and I will try and get that fixed for future videos. And of course, please subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. I've only been at this a month and we already have almost 80 subscribers, which is more subs than I thought I would probably ever get. So the support has been unreal. It would be great to see this community grow and to get more people watching and talking and conversing about Warcry. It's a great game and I just want to see more people get involved. So again, thanks for all your support. Any future support, anything, it's fantastic. It's great to see. And until next time, I'll catch you later, legends.